welcome to a new episode of Hello World. So today we're going to talk about demand-side sales and what is that. So I'm thinking that design thinking, customer journeys, customer-centric strategies, these are all words we've heard a lot about during the last years. And I think with digital transformation, it has actually increased even more because suddenly the customer had all the power. It was really easy to click and choose something else. And companies are trying to be more focused about what is it actually the customer wants to buy and why. So that's what we're going to speak about today.
And today we are meeting Bob Moesta, CEO of the consultancy Rewired, and one of the principal architects behind the jobs to be done theory, an important basis of the innovation framework. He has dedicated his life to develop products and services that help people make progress in their life. He's also the author of Demandside Sales 101, where he shares his advice on flipping the lens on sales, from selling to helping people make progress. So welcome to Hello World, Bob.
Good afternoon. Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you. You're one of my house gods. I really look forward to this conversation.
Good. I'm excited to share, as always.
Great to hear. You just recently published your new book, Demandside Sales, which focuses on how to sell to customers by helping them solve their struggles. What traits would you say a salesperson needs to have to succeed in a world where the customer is more powerful than ever?
Yeah. So what's interesting to me is that partially one of the reasons why I wrote this book was the fact is like here in the U.S. When you go to business school, there are no sales classes. They actually don't teach sales in business school, which is kind of crazy when you think about it. I've done 7 startups, and it's one of the things where I knew it was the hardest thing out of everything I had to do, because you have to sell investors, you have to sell actually co-founders, you have to sell customers. You're selling all the time, and so part of this is Clay Christensen, who's one of my mentors, and I would sit down and talk about this and say, why aren't there really sales professors? And as you get through it, it's one of those things that's very, very hard to teach, and there's no underlying theory behind it. And so when you start to really peel back this onion, right, and you start to realize, like, what's a really good salesperson? They actually listen. They actually are empathetic. They actually try to understand you more than they understand themselves. They're trying to actually decide fit. And so what you start to realize is salespeople are almost like the hub of the wheel. They have to know cost. They have to know timing. They have to know packaging. They have to know the customer. They have to know almost everything. And so to me, really good companies, what they do is they end up realizing that the salespeople are more than people just to manage the funnel. They are people who actually listen and are empathetic and basically understand how the business works to help it not only make progress, but to help the customer make progress.
Yeah. So you're one of the founders and thinkers behind the jobs to be done theory, which basically focuses on saying the customer is not really interested in buying a product, but they're there to solve a problem. So could you tell us a bit more about the theory, of course, but then also how do you go about to find out actually what a customer wants, what the jobs to be done is?
So the way I usually say is I would think I was born an engineer out of the womb, right? I was been breaking things for 50 years. I've been fixing things for 45 years so I don't get in trouble, but I've been building things for over 35 years. And what I realized is that the way that marketing would talk to me as an engineer would tell me all about the person, but that it wouldn't actually put the person in context to tell me all the things that what they meant. So they'd say, we need it to be easy, fast, and convenient. And I would literally go like, well, what do you mean by that? And they're like, well, you know what easy is. I'm like, no, there's 27 different definitions of easy. And so part of this is that the mantra that I say is that context creates value and contrast creates meaning. And it's this aspect of realizing that people really don't, like, when you start to peel back the onion and ask why they want something, you start to realize, like, most things have to fit into people's lives. And we miss this whole notion of, like, that we're so focused on the product and we ask about a feature and then we figure out how to make that feature better as opposed to why is that feature important to the customer. I think Ted Levitt said it best. He goes, people don't want a 1/4-inch drill. They want a 1/4-inch hole.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's really kind of where this comes from, is making sure that we have the right perspective or the right level of meaningfulness to a customer. Is that a lot of times people don't care if a car has a cup holder or not. It might make it more convenient or have less struggles. But the reality is they're not buying the car because of the cup holders.
No.
Right. So where's that meaningful level that makes of what causes people to do something? And so it's my other mentor. So I have 4 big mentors. This is my office, and I have, these are paintings I did of them, and they look down at me as I have to uphold their honor, if you will. And Dr. Deming would always say that nothing is random and everything is caused, and he's number 4 up there. And so to me, it's like what causes people to do things as opposed to people randomly buying. And so to me, it's those kinds of things that really kind of push me to say I have to think about this differently. And so I actually went and learned criminal and intelligence interrogation methods. Not that I use, extreme methods, but it's more about understanding how the lies people tell themselves of why they buy something, and versus what they really are trying to do. And so you start to realize you have to peel back that onion and understand what are the real meanings behind the words and where are they trying to, like, so for example, if you ask somebody who didn't buy your product, they'll say, oh, it was price. Right? And usually most people don't know what to say besides like, I just got to lower my price. And my aspect is it's a never price. It's value. At some point in time, if it was too much, like, what did you think you weren't getting? Or what did you think that that the other ones could do that the competitor could do that we couldn't do? And so part of this is to understand what they mean by price, not just stop at price.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So if you're a normal company and not having studied forensics and interview technique and so on, how do you go about to find out about your customer jobs? Because I mean, a lot of companies do like voice of customer and so on, but that's not really the same thing, right?
So to be honest, this all started at Voice of the Customer for me. So when I was 18, I met Dr. Deming, and I was able to go to Japan, and we learned a method called quality function deployment, where you take the voice of the customer and then you translate it into what are the metrics that basically do they mean by it, and then how do our systems or our products actually deliver on those things. So it started with that. But what I realized is that when you start to get to importance ratings and hierarchies, is that different contexts cause those hierarchies to change. And so you start to realize like it's not about a person or about scores. It's about what context actually causes people to value this feature over that feature, or this outcome over that outcome. Yeah. And so part of this was really being able to kind of uncover it. So the first thing to really actually understand is I don't talk to anybody who wants to do something. I talk to people who have done something. So, for example, one of the things I did from 2005 to 2008, I built homes. And so to build better homes, what I did is I figured out what causes people to say, today's the day I'm going to move. I'm going to sell my old house and buy a new house. And by understanding their journey and understanding the causal factors and understanding what we call the dominoes, what had to happen in their lives. So what most of the time we do when we do a product or we do a customer journey, we talk about the product the entire time. And what I want to do, and so we usually only talk about the journey from when they get introduced to us. Yeah. But the reality is the journey starts way before us. And so it's understanding what were Clay, I think, said it best. He said, questions create spaces in the brain for solutions to fall into. I'm going to say that one more time. Yeah. It's very powerful. Questions create spaces in the brain for solutions to fall into. And so the reality is, how do we actually find the questions that people ask to say, we should think about moving, right? And when you start the journey from that, you start to realize it's a 6-month, 12-month, 2-year process, not a 3-week process of buying a house. Yeah. And so you start to realize the journey is way bigger. And the fact is like, the house is a very small part of the entire notion of moving. It's one part, but it's not the part. And what I realized is, for example, when I added things like one of the struggling moments they had about moving was basically, what do I do with all my stuff? I have a 3,000 square foot or a 300 meter house, and I'm moving to a 150 meter house, and so square meter house. And so you start to realize, like, well, you know what? I'm going to include moving and storage and a way to sort all that stuff so we can help people who want to move easier and move into our condos. We had 22% increase in sales because we added moving.
Yeah.
Well, most people would say, like, well, a builder shouldn't actually think about moving. It's like my competitors were offering free granite or stainless steel appliances or all these other things, and we were literally just we were killing them, and they couldn't figure out why.
Yeah.
So you mentioned interrogation techniques for asking questions and interviews, that you studied that. If I'm a company who wants to interview my customers who has done something, as you mentioned,
yes,
how would you go about and structure those interviews or prepare yourself for those interviews?
Yeah. So I've been lucky enough to so I'm dyslexic, and as a little kid, I was again very ambitious. So I did things like where I built a parachute and jumped off the second story of my house and broke my leg. Right.
Poor kid.
So
Poor
I
parents.
did a lot of I had 3 close head brain injuries before I was 7, and so I'm dyslexic and I can't really read and write very well. And so I've been writing books back and forth, but I found a process to help me get my thoughts out of my head. And then I have people who love to write and are very interested in my topics to help me write the books that I've been writing. Mm-hmm. But I came across this book. It's called Never Split the Difference.
Yeah.
And it's by Chris Voss, and it is an amazing book. And so when you actually read this book, if you were to watch me do an interview, so like I have a YouTube channel where we do interviews, and you can see it. I also have Jobs to Be Done Radio where you can hear us do these interviews. But all those techniques are literally in this book, and he wrote such a great book, and it's so detailed. And he talks about mirroring, right? Or like, so for example, one of the things you want to do is, as to make people comfortable, right? You want to kind of mirror their pace, right? Yep. And so he talked about all these different tools and techniques of how to actually understand people. So I'm not doing it to extract, have them confess something they didn't do. Mm-hmm. I'm just trying to make sure I can understand what they did and why they did it, and connect the dots. What you realize is most customers don't understand, kind of their actual causal mechanisms of why they do something. They come up with a reason, and then they just tell themselves, well, I bought that new car because it was a deal, and it had great gas mileage. And then when you actually talk to them about it, they realize, like, at some point, no, the old car was broken. It needed repairs. The fact is you were planning 2 big trips. Like, there's all this other stuff around it, and that's what the interrogation is about. The important part, though, is I'll tell you this is, I made the mistake very early is trying to actually talk to people who wanted to, for example, buy a car or buy a house, and they just dream, and they actually don't know what they want until they see it. And so part of it is that you end up trying to help them understand, like, all these things in the future, and the reality is, like, they can't make that decision. So I rarely, if ever, talk to people about the future. I talk to people about the struggling moments they have today, because for every person who struggles today, there's another 100,000, 10,000, 1 million people behind them who will have that struggle tomorrow. And so it's the struggling moment that is the seed for all innovation. And to be honest, it's the seed for growth. And so as a salesperson, to be honest, how do we actually understand where people struggle? Because that's where they're going to actually buy something to help them get rid of that struggle.
Yeah. But there's another side to it as well, right? Because, I mean, even if you struggle and you find a solution, then people will still not maybe switch to the new solution, however good it seems to be, right? So it's important to find out as well, what are the motivators for you to switch and not switch, I guess.
That's right. Well, there's 2 aspects to it. One is we talk about this notion of what we call the forces of progress. There's a push of the situation, and there's a pull of the gain that they would get by having the new product. But below the waterline is this anxiety of the new and the habit that they have to overcome. And so a lot of times we were, at least for me, I was taught basically is, find the pain and talk about the gain.
Yeah.
But the reality is the anxiety and the habit are the two things that are also part of that system of what causes people to make progress. And when you understand these other two forces, the friction, right, that is there, that limits people. So a lot of people say, oh, I would love to do that. And the but is the anxieties. So how do you actually understand why they can't do things? And in a lot of cases, this isn't about adding more features to your product. In some cases, it's about reducing features or actually doing things that are what I would say is outside your core business.
Yeah. I think sometimes it's also about finding how you should position the product or how you should speak about it. So it's really understanding the drivers. So you might not need to change so much the products and services, but you need to position it in a different way so that you're actually talking to them and explaining how you can help in that sense.
Yeah. I've been collaborating with people like April Dunford and Claire Sullentrope, and people who are really, they focus a lot on positioning. And what you start to realize is a lot of times people, they only talk about their features and benefits. But the fact is that when people start the journey of trying to make progress, the first thing is they only have actually problem language. Yeah. And so you're talking about a bunch of features, right? And at the same time, they're factoring like I have so for example, like people will say like, well, you have a leadership problem. But what you realize is leadership is a solution. What they have is turnover. They have basically lack of motivation, and leadership is the answer. And so what you have to do is talk about the problems that people have to go like, oh my gosh, that's me. Oh, this is what I want. Yeah. And so you start to realize that lots of times people, again, the way marketing is trained or taught is its features and benefits as opposed to context and outcome.
Yeah. Yeah. So go ahead.
When you talk to somebody that has done or bought some product that you're interviewing, is there anything in particular that you think you should be listening for?
Yeah. Yeah. So the first thing is what I do. The way I say it, I set it up like this: is like, look, thank you so much for your time. We're doing very early research to understand the language that people use to talk about buying or using our product. And there are no right or wrong answers. I don't actually have a list of questions. What I want to do is I want to hear all the way from kind of what you bought and when you bought it to basically, and then go backwards to understand kind of what was going on in your life that said, or in your business that said, today's the day we need to get something. And to be honest, I just want to hear your story. I might ask some strange questions. So the way to think about it is I'm going to do a documentary. And so I might ask who was in the room or why did you say this, and you don't have to answer the questions, but I'm literally making up the questions as we go so I can actually truly understand and listen to your story. And that's how I set up doesn't matter the interview. I've done why do people switch churches or religion? I've done why do people switch schools? I've done, why do people choose different doctors? And you just start to realize like it's all that same kind of setup to hear their story. And what's so interesting is when you dig deep enough, most people are like, oh my gosh, that's like therapy. Like I didn't actually know all this work for me to actually figure out how to do this. And you start to realize like to buy a new software package for a corporation, for example, people would say, well, it's very functional. It's very cut and dry. It's like they have a purchasing process. But at the end of the day, most people, it's very emotional and it's very social. And you start to realize that there's these other parts of energy that motivate people. And so part of this is finding the energy that is literally pushing people along or pulling people along to say, we should do this. Like, so if somebody's saying like, boy, we need to replace this piece of software, it's like, yeah, it's just getting, at some point it's like it just kept slowing us down. I'm like, so what? So it's slowing you down. It's like that. It can't be that much. And then they start to talk about the fear they have of, well, if it doesn't speed up and it slows down more, they're going to fire me. Right? So these are the things you want to be able to get to. You want to get down to the underlying roots of what they're afraid of or what they're hoping for as they were buying your product.
Yeah. I'm also thinking that you might use these interviews for a product you haven't done yet. So it's in the innovation phase. So I'm assuming then it's really important not to speak about the solution, but really just try to listen to what is it they're struggling with so that you can figure out what it is you can bring to the market to help them, right?
Yeah, so those are actually a little trickier And the way we look at it is I try to actually identify. So if I have an underlying technology, I'll say like, what are people not going to do when my technology is here? So what are they going to end up firing? And
exactly.
so I'll go interview people who recently bought that. And then so for example, we did some work around home health care. And the technology it did not exist. Nobody actually was in the market. But what we did is we actually then understood what caused people to say, today's the day I need to bring somebody in to help my mother. And it was a service. It was a physical person. But my thing is it's what we're really trying to get to is what I call technology agnostic requirements that are from the customer that are irrelevant of the solution that I bring.
Yeah.
Yeah, because the difficulty is to see what the struggle is for a product that doesn't exist, and you can't ask anybody who has bought that product since it doesn't exist.
You basically need to find out how you're solving the problem today, and what is difficult for you with it, and so that you can figure out how can you help their struggles in that sense.
Right. That's right. But there's the cool part of all this, and this is why innovation is always has job security, is because every innovation, right, solves one struggling moment, but almost always creates a new struggling moment.
Yeah.
So like the iPhone at some point had a bunch of cord. Like at some point the battery life wasn't good enough, but it was good enough to actually integrate into 3 devices into one. But it didn't have enough battery life, so people carried around cords and chargers and everything, and then they got the battery life better, and then the camera didn't work, and so now the camera's like all of a sudden. So there is a line of struggling moments that you can actually show where, for example, we can actually see what the next struggling moments are 2 and 3 generations out.
Yeah. So who should be doing these interviews, and who should not be doing it?
That's a tough question, because I've over the years I've become a proponent of I think everybody in the company should learn the language of the customer and what they mean by things. And so, for example, like when we do work in healthcare, most people, when they talk about going to the doctor, they never talk about, nobody goes to the doctor to be healthy. They go to the doctor because they're sick. If they want to get healthy, they go to the gym. They hire a trainer. They change their diet. But very few people here in the U.S. talk about health like it's health care. So it's almost renamed the wrong way. And so part of this is being able to make sure that everybody in the company actually hears that. I would say starting out, I think it should be a cross-functional team. The greatest success I've seen is people like Intercom, where they brought their executive team, Owen McCabe and Des Traynor, the 2 co-founders, and then the head of product, the head of marketing, and the head of research. They all basically came and we did the interviews together where they could hear the language, and then from there they actually then built the strategy on that.
Yeah.
At the same time, the fact is Intercom also has as an onboarding program when you come to the company that you actually participate in these interviews, so you can hear the voice of the customer right out of the hat as you're new to the company, to hear what customers really mean as opposed to what you think it means.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
How many interviews do you need?
So what's interesting is it's a great question. So the way that we end up doing it is we used a little bit of math. I can't read, but I can do math very well. And we use a designed experiment to basically do 10 to 12 interviews of people who are very different in terms of demographic or I'll say context. But in the 10 to 12 interviews, you can actually see the underlying patterns right away.
Yeah.
If you quote just randomly pick people, you have to do 40 or 50. But my thing is if you actually think smart about it, you can do it in 10 to 12.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good. Thank you so much for joining the show, Bob. I think we've learned so much more. And basically, it's just about doing it, right? I mean, I hear often that clients are saying, well, we don't really have those contact with clients. They don't have time to speak with us. And there's sort of a fear of reaching out and finding out. But then once they do it, it's like nirvana. They're like, wow, this is the best thing I've ever done.
Yeah, that it's always so surprising to me about that anxiety around it, and you try to realize like there, in some cases, I think part of this is most people are how do I say, they almost assume they should know all this already.
Yeah.
And so they don't really want to be seen as naive or stupid. And the thing is that I think part of the gift I was given as being dyslexic is that I knew I was never going to get an A, and I just had to start. And if I could iterate enough, I could get myself from a D to a C, maybe a B. But the fact is I knew I didn't know.
Yeah.
Where most people feel like they know or they should know, and they're afraid because they don't want to reveal what they don't know.
Yeah.
And the difficult part is to convince the customer to actually go to their customers and ask the questions.
Yeah, because I think. Okay, so thank you so much for taking the time and joining us.
Thank you for having me on. It was wonderful.
Thanks.
Bye
bye.
Bye bye.
So it's about, as Steve Blank was saying, getting the hell out of the building and talk to the customers as usual. And I think now we got lots of tips on how to do it as well.
Yes.
I'm currently in an assignment where I'm working on these questions, so it's really interesting to hear.
And the book also is full of more examples.
More examples. I think
what he's talking about.
To be honest, I think I've been on that YouTube channel. I don't know how many hours actually. There's lots to learn from listening how they actually do the interviews. So, thank you so much for joining us today, and follow us on LinkedIn so you don't miss any future episodes. Thank you. Bye bye.